It was July of 1964, and we were living in the historic town of St. Thomas Mount in India. It was about 8:30 p.m., and I had just come home from work. As I entered the dining room to get a drink of water, my Uncle George and Auntie Theo spoke to me excitedly. "Peter, you won't believe who we have on the board right now." The board they were referring to was an Ouija board. Auntie Theo was visiting from Calcutta, and Uncle George was visiting from a few streets away. The Ouija board was their hobby. Uncle's wife didn't approve of him messing around with the occult, so our place was a venue of choice. My mom, which was their sister, was more tolerant. The spirit on the board called itself Ethan and claimed to be from Venus. I was crazy about astronomy and all things extraterrestrial, hence the reaction when I walked in. However, I was not overly excited. After all, an entity can't say it's from Venus or any other planet. Then, Ethan broke into our short conversation to inform us that the singer Jim Reeves had just died in a plane crash. He went on to spell out the news, and that they hadn't found the wreckage yet, and it would be a couple days before the news was made public. Jim Reeves' songs were very popular in India in the 1960s. About 5 months later, in December of 1964, Theo's brother-in-law Oscar paid us a visit from Calcutta. While we were chatting about family matters, he noticed a picture of a sailing ship on the calendar and picked it up for a closer look. We held our breaths, because on the back of the calendar, Uncle George had painted the letters of the Ouija board, and Oscar found it. After an embarrassing silence, he turned to me and said Peter, Ella, which was my cousin, and Kathleen, a relative of Oscar, were also fooling with this thing back home, and claimed that they heard from a guy from Venus. While he was still communicating with him, Jim Reeves died. We were probably one of the very first to know about his death. As you might imagine, there was a stunned silence. Then it was Oscar's turn to be surprised. "Was his name Ethan?" I asked. It was. More than 800 miles away, this same person with the unusual name from Venus. About 3 months later, in early 1965, Oscar paid us another visit. This trip was to warn Auntie Theo about the board. He told us that one day, Kathleen's husband got home earlier than expected and found her naked, with the letters of the Ouija board inked on her bare body. She was operating the board on her own. She didn't recognize her husband and completely lost her sanity. Kathleen was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The Ouija board claimed another victim. Did Ethan have anything to do with this? If he didn't, he could have warned them about the danger. Sometime around the end of 1963, 9 years later, we had moved to Melbourne, Australia. As we were watching the TV program A Current Affair, the presenter interviewed Sydney Clairvoyant, who claimed to be in regular psychic contact with a being from Venus, whose name was also Ethanus. According to another story, on a September night in 1961 in Prescott, Arizona, a 4-year-old named David was seen by his neighbors in the company of strangers walking in the woods behind their home. It was around 2 a.m. When questioned later, this little boy explained to his startled father and neighbor that he had gone for a ride in his new friend's big sky car, from which our world looked like a pea. The name of this friend? Ethan, a 4-year-old's pronunciation of Ethan. What I'm going to share with you is very strange. On May 27th, I was playing with the Ouija board, asking questions about the future. The response I got from it was pretty insane. I didn't know what it meant, so I dismissed it. 2 days later, I was getting ready to go to my friend's house when I heard a very deep male voice from somewhere say, "I can see you." I freaked out and realized that I left my window open, so I looked outside, but I saw no one there. My mind was playing tricks on me. At 8 o'clock, it was already getting dark, so I called my friend to let her know that I was on my way. My mom and I got into the car and drove off. As we were driving, my mom and I saw a man standing on the sidewalk. He was about 5'8" and was wearing black clothes, had brown hair and brown eyes. He was staring at us, smiling. That itself scared the heck out of me as we drove by him. I looked behind me and saw this man start to walk slowly towards us. I said to my mom, "Can you drive a little faster?" And then she quickly agreed. I looked back and he was nowhere to be seen. We get to my friend's house at 9:30. I kissed my mom goodbye and she drove off. I told my friend about the weird guy standing on the sidewalk. She said, "He must have been a psycho or a drunk." My friend's parents weren't home. because they thought we could take care of ourselves since we were both 16. We sat down and started to talk about guys and high school. In the corner of my eye, I see a shadow pass by the window, and I told my friend. She checked outside, but saw no one out there. It began to rain, so my friend said, "Hey, do you want me to show you my basement? It's really cool." As we started to go down the stairs, we heard a loud knocking sound coming from the front door. My friend and I went to check it out, but no one was there. We started to get spooked and sat down in the living room. As we talked to my friend, we both saw a man standing there outside the window. I told my friend that it was the same weird man that I saw earlier, and we both ran down to the basement. We heard the front door open, and we could hear footsteps. My friend said, "I locked all the doors and windows. How the heck did he get in?" We heard insane laughter, and then footsteps coming from toward the basement steps. We quickly locked the door leading to my friend's basement. We heard breathing outside the door, and I said, "I'm going to call my mom." As I was talking to my mom, the breathing stopped, and we heard the footsteps move away. We quickly went upstairs. My mom arrived and saw that the front door was open. She took my friend and me to her car and told us to remain in the car. She took out her cell phone and dialed 911. 10 minutes later, the police arrived, and I told them what I saw and what he looked like. It was midnight, and my friend's parents returned home. While my mom was driving home, she told me that before she got to my friend's house, she saw the same man walking away from the house. She told me that he was laughing at her as he walked by. I live in London. I have a friend who's a medium with 3 spirit guides. A few years back, in the late 1990s, I went to visit him on a hot summer afternoon. I knew he had used the Ouija board, and I was quite curious. I wouldn't usually mess with one myself, but I felt safe to ask him if he could show me something. His board was homemade, and drawn in permanent black ink on a wooden back of an antique dresser table mirror. He sat on the sofa, and I sat opposite on the floor with my back against the wall, about 6 feet away. He rested the mirror/Ouija board on his lap and placed a small upturned glass on the board, but he didn't touch the glass. I asked him if he was going to touch it, and he said it would move by itself. We sat for a good 5 to 10 minutes as he tried to meditate or go into a trance, but the neighbors were mowing the lawn, and the guy downstairs' wife was shouting, "Do you want something to drink?" My friend said he couldn't concentrate, but we'd try again later. Against the wall, to his left, as we sat down, he said, "Come on, Robert, where are you?" Robert is his dead cousin. Suddenly, the hair stood up all along my arms, up the back of my neck and over my head. I felt like the time had slowed down and almost standing still. The whole room went different. The angles of the room were all out, and it didn't feel square anymore. It was really weird. Then, the mirror started shaking violently. I could hear the glass bending, and I thought the mirror was going to shatter. I lifted my arms to shield my face in case it exploded, and it stopped shaking. The surface of the mirror became like a liquid, and 2 hands came out of this mercury, gripped either side of the mirror frame, and it began to pull itself out into the room. I thought it was going to climb right out, but it didn't. It just had its upper torso out of the mirror into the room, the shining liquid mercury shape of a powerful man. I felt like it was looking right at me, at my soul. Then I saw its eyes, 2 flashes of golden light. It spoke to my mind. It said, "We are real." Then it sort of folded back into the mirror in a split second, and the room went normal again, like time had suddenly been unbent and restarted the same as before, with the neighbors busy doing their gardening on a hot summer afternoon. During the experience, my friend couldn't turn around as he was unable to move, but he heard the glass bending and saw the sun's reflection bouncing all over the room as the mirror flexed and shook. He said that he could see it all in his mind's eye, but that he was just looking at my face, which I'm sure must have been a picture. I only went back there once, and I felt very creepy near that mirror. I forced myself to pick it up and tried to bend it, but the wood must have been over an inch thick and very old, hard oak. I put it down in case something grabbed me and pulled me back into another dimension. Growing up in a pagan home, ghosts and such were never new to me. I've seen them my entire life. I started when I was 6. My mother had an image of God and Jesus, Where she got it from or who gave it to her, I don't know, but I saw demonic faces in the picture all the time. Finally, I told my mother and she removed it, and that was that. When I was 7, we moved 2 houses down, and things were great for a while. Then weird things started to happen. When I was 14, my friend swore up and down she saw a dark figure behind me in the hallway with a knife raised to my back. It spooked me so much that I would walk with my back to the wall. Anyone who came over would see glowing red eyes peeking out of my bedroom, and then the door would slam shut. After a while, most of my friends refused to come over. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom because whenever I was in there, I could never sleep, and weird things would always happen, so I slept on the family room couch. Let's fast forward a few years. I was 18 and living in Tennessee with my then fiance, Sam, and his mother. This was 1997, and one night she pulled out her spirit board, not an Ouija board, but some kind of other spirit board. Right away, things started to happen. I went into a trance and started talking about Gail's dead sister, whom I have never met or seen a picture of. I described her to a T, and Gail asked Sam if I had ever seen a picture of her, and he said no. So I spoke to her dead sister Linda, and Gail became so upset because there was a gate and a spirit guardian blocking the way and would not let me communicate with her in depth. Gail headed off to bed, and Sam asked me if I wanted to continue. I agreed. We tried for about 20 minutes, and no other spirits would come through. So Sam said, I have an idea, and left the room, returning with the genuine Ouija board. This will work, he said. Before starting, he did the protection ritual, but screwed it up, so he had to enter me into the ritual. Right away, 2 girls came through. One was 15 and the other was 19. They said that they were slave girls who were murdered. I wanted proof, so I asked them questions only the dead would know, and got the right responses, so I was satisfied. Then out of nowhere, they just stopped talking. We tried getting them back, but nothing. Then another presence came through, saying its name was David. We spoke with David for some time, but then I started noticing lies. When Sam left the room for a minute to use the bathroom, I confronted David. I said, "Your name is not David, and you're lying." He replied with, "You caught me." I asked, "Who are you really?" And he responded, "Abandon." I had no clue who that was, but I continued to talk to him. Sam returned, and I told him what he said. "That's not funny, Jen. Knock it off," Sam said. I told him that I was dead serious, and through the board, Abandon said, "She's right. She's not lying." Sam's eyes got so wide, and he looked terrified. "We're ending this now," Sam said. Abandon pointed to no. Before Abandon could say anything else, Sam ended it, shoving the pointer to goodbye. I asked him what was wrong, but he wouldn't tell me. Later that night we were in bed, and Sam was reading, while I was asleep. I woke up to the sound of growling and talking. I looked over to the corner, and there by the closed door was a black-robed figure. I tried to scream and move something, and I couldn't. For some reason, it chose the Grim Reaper look, scythe and all. He slowly moved toward me, until he was sitting on my stomach and pinning me down. I couldn't move, talk, or anything. I was completely terrified. He was sitting there, breathing on me, and the first thing I thought was, the dead don't breathe.